Good morning. My name is Amanda Rivera. I'm the hearing examiner presiding over today's case. The date is June 1st, 2023, and this is case DCI 2022-00066. It's an amendment to an existing CPD in South Fort Myers. Because this is a quasi-judicial hearing, all evidence and testimony must be taken under oath. So if you intend to speak, if you could please raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will provide is the truth?
Yes. I do. Yes.
Thank you. Do we have any members of the public here this morning? I don't see any, so I will dispense with those instructions and we can begin with the applicant.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Rivera. Derek Rooney on behalf of Gray Robinson and Nissan. Going forward today, we have, this is our team, Tim Keene, Civil Engineering, myself, Fred Dravlik, Land Use Planner, Ted Treach for Transportation, and Josh Kelly is our Landscape Architect. Also with us is the client's representative, Mike Spinazzi, who is the General Manager and can give you any answers to any questions you have with respect to operational details. In addition, Mike Randolph is here as well. He was involved in the 2011 rezoning, so he may be able to give some additional background information if necessary. As you pointed out, this is a rezoning of approximately 13 acres of property from Resolution Z11031, amending the Sutherlin Nissan CPD, adding 2 additional deviations and an increase in the maximum building square footage of 32,000 square feet. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Dravlik.
Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. So I want to take you around the location and the site just to orient you a little bit better. As Mr. Rooney said, 12.63 acres and frontage on US 41. There are 2 access points which are existing now. We'll talk about that a little bit later. There's going to be some enhancements to the US 41, the way the continuing turn lane operates, that will improve safety, but for now the entrances are going to remain as is in a redevelopment. So it's currently zoned for CPD. It's used as a vehicle dealership used for Sutherlin Nissan and the Fort Myers Genesis. That's the intention moving forward as well, just with some expansion and a different layout of the site plan. The intended redevelopment will create the Genesis showroom, expanded Sutherlin Nissan building. I did the zoning, 10 years ago, and there was actually 2 site plans, and one showed an expanded Nissan building years ago, and it's kind of an improvement on that site plan, the original zoning, to bring this one into the modern days of an auto dealership. So the existing schedule uses are unchanged. The environmental conditions, for the most part, except for little tweaks that were necessary under development regulations, remain the same. The preserves are going to remain the same place. The buffers around all the borders, particularly the ones affecting any residentials, are going to be unchanged as well. And then, like I said, there's slight modification to some development regulations. If you want that amount of detail, we have some in presentation. It's all very well outlined in the staff report, and then Mr. Keene can answer any details about the development regulations because they're moving forward with the development order. The casual walk around here, of course, so we'll start to the north. To the very north, clear to the corner of Daniels and US 41 is the Market Square Shopping Center that all of us have probably used at some point. Directly to the north and abutting that small building now, that's the Fort Myers Genesis, that is going to be replaced by a larger building that's more central to the property. Just above that, former restaurant building, and then you drive back Electronics Lane, you can see this Qualcomm communication building. I don't know what they do in there, but they do communicate something. Down here to the south is a former Scanlon Lexus dealership, I believe, and vacation, so it's vacant now. And then across the road, this has been a dealership strip for a while now. It looks like it's in a state of changeover a little bit. New Mini Cooper dealership, and then a former Honda dealership, and then existing Volkswagen.
Is the parcel to the north and east of Qualcomm, is that the open space for the Market Square CPD? It's shown as part of the Market Square CPD zoning on the master concept plan, but I wasn't sure.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
In fact, the 16-foot wall that gets talked about in the buffers and conditions, that continues from our property line, and that was part of the Market Square conditions. because Brynwood was there before Market Square. So that continues all the way up to the Ozark Bank near Daniels Parkway. So, yep, exactly. And then this is our preserve area, and then the buffer wall that runs along there. Let's see, we'll go to the next one. Now this is pretty straightforward here. This is in the intensive future land use category. The surrounding is in central urban. So this is known as an intensive development area, obviously, with the types of uses that are existing. The major arterial US 41. This is an appropriate place and appropriate location for this type of use, and it fits into the intensive development definition very well. It is part of, there is a mixed-use overlay portion to it, so I put this on here to show you that. It's not quite the northern parcel of the two parcels here, but it does cover some of that. A couple of the deviations had to do with that because the mixed-use overlay requires interconnection to the north that is unable to be done because of the existing buildings that are already there and that was never planned for. So I pointed out the mixed-use overlay just for your information there. Of course, you can see the surrounding zoning. Most of it's either CPD or some type of conventional commercial zoning, a lot of CG zoning and other larger CPDs. And then, of course, the Brynwood neighborhood and the Bell Tower Park were zoned for single-family residential and then multifamily coach homes. All right, so this is kind of the 20,000-foot overview of the changes. There really aren't too many. There's two major changes. One is to increase the maximum building area from 58,000 square feet to 90,000 square feet. And then we'll show you how that looks on the site, on the master concept plan. It enlarges the current Nissan building, moves it a little bit east, creating a little bit better traffic or a little better parking lot flow in front of the building. And then it creates room for the new Genesis dealership building. Major discussion 10 years ago, same discussion today, or with the Brynwood neighbors to make sure that they're buffered well and that they're taken care of as far as light, noise, and vegetation in between. So between relationships, great outreach that our team has done. They didn't show up today because we're not changing enough that they were really overly concerned because it's going to remain largely the way it is, including most of the lighting, the preservation. The 16-foot wall is already there. The building is coming a little bit closer, and we have a graphic on that, but it's still at least 600 feet away from the property line, and almost 1,000 feet away from the closest building, or the closest house in Brynwood. So I think there were a lot of things that were required in the previous zoning, such as no deliveries between 8 p.m. 8 a.m., no loudspeakers on site, those things that are carrying forward as conditions that we're happy to comply with.
Excuse me, the lighting condition was not carried forward. Was that intentional? I assume it was because it was just complying with the LDC, and we don't usually condition approvals on that.
Yep.
But would that provide comfort to the neighbors if that stayed in? Was that a discussion that was had?
I don't know. We can ask that, but I mean, obviously, anything that's going to comply with the LDC, we aren't going to object to having it conditioned.
There's a lighting condition.
There was a lighting condition in the 11 resolution, and it just didn't get carried forward. But again, it's not something we would typically include now because all it required is that you comply with the LDC, which you have to do anyway. But sometimes we do, as you know, still include those if it does provide some comfort to the folks next door. So it was just a question I had.
Yeah, I remember, and it was just that we will comply. Yeah, it didn't say anything outside of the LDC. So, and yeah, that would be fine if that would bring comfort. So, and then deviations, the deviations are changed, but not to a significant degree. So all the deviations that are still relevant that were previously approved are carried forward. And then there are a few deviations that were added because of just development between the two property lines and the interconnection for the mixed use overlay. So they were only changed, we only requested them as needed to either accommodate the current development or allow for the new development between the two parcels. And the mixed-use overlay is new since that time, since 2010 as well. So those are the differences in the deviations. And with that, I want to bring up Tim Keene to go through the master concept plan. We can get into many details as you need and go through those things, and I'll come back with the LDC and the comp plan consistency. All right, thanks.
Do you have a copy of the PowerPoint also for the record? Thank you. Whoever wants to give it.
I got one right here already ready for her.
Thank you.
Sorry I didn't hand it to you earlier. There's
Not at all.
also blow-ups of the master concept plan over an aerial.
Okay, thank you. So let me take these in order. So I've got the PowerPoint presentation will be applicants exhibit 1. And I did receive the 48-hour letter, so that was pre-labeled applicants exhibit A. Then I've got, this is the enlarged master concept plan, the same as what's in the staff report?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. So that will be applicants exhibit 2. And then applicants 3 will be the overlay of the MCP on top of an aerial. Thank you for providing that.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Again, for the record, Tim Keene with Keene Development, the civil engineer for the project. I have been sworn as an expert witness in this forum previously. Just to go over the site plan, what actually might be easier is this one. You can kind of see where the changes are. These northerly buildings are all gone now. This is a tent, but these have all been taken out. They were damaged heavily in Hurricane Ian, so they have been taken out. There's a temporary structure right here currently to operate as the temporary Genesis dealership, so they can maintain brand compliance. This is the new Genesis building. This is the new Nissan building. This is the existing Nissan building. So that building previously, before it was Nissan, was Kelly Tractor, so which is out now off of I-75 and Luckett Road. But they were on this piece of property previously, and there was like a used car dealer on this north piece of property. So the red dash line represents the two parcel lines. To accommodate the Genesis dealer, we actually have to move the parcel line between the two pieces of property slightly, and a number of the deviations deal with this new property line between the two properties. We are going to make we're going to adjust this line, keep them as two parcels. The same people, but two separate ownership entities, but relative to construction financing for this building versus this building, they need to be separate. So there's going to be a lot split application accompanying the development order to address this. I want to point out there's a difference between this aerial and the black and white master concept plan. It has to do with up here on this right turn lane. So the master concept plan of the aerial matches what was submitted for the DO. So there's a couple of slight little differences in curbing internally and things like that. Nothing around the perimeter or buffers or anything. But we're working with FDOT. So FDOT has a continuous right turn lane that goes all the way up to the entrance to where the Barnes & Noble is. And so these have become problematic. People go too fast in the turn lanes when the traffic backs up on the through lanes. And there has been some incidences at these entrances, for safety reasons. So FDOT has asked us to take out a part of the turn lane, and we're working with them. I don't know that we can accomplish the north one due to how the road drains. So that's something I'm still working on with FDOT. This one, the south one, is fortunate. It's at the high point in the road, and it lets me handle drainage easily. So that's just the difference between this plan. You can see it's lacking up there.
So is the actual location of the access points changing, or it's just?
No, between the two plans are the same.
Okay, so the distancing's going to.
Well, we are adjusting the access points slightly. We're widening them. So, and the north entrance widens north, and the south entrance is adjusted slightly. And probably, let's see. We're trying to increase the spacing from this Petty's Way. When this piece of property to the south of us, which is owned by the Scanlons, comes in for the development, they'll have to re-permit their access with FDOT. So FDOT has asked us to meet spacing requirements from Petty's Way to the south entrance of Sutherlin. And so we are accommodating that by slightly adjusting the south entrance of Sutherlin and widening it at the same time. So we've gone over these spacings with FDOT in some pre-application meetings, and they seem to be comfortable with everything thus far. We are widening the driveways. Currently, the driveways are what could be called a curb cut, where you drive up over the sidewalk. It's a little ramp part of the sidewalk, and we're turning them into turnouts. So it'll be asphalt. There'll be a gutter going across it, but it'll be mostly asphalt. And we're raising them up a little bit. The grades are the driveways are a little low because they were existing before the original Nissan was expanded. And it helps larger vehicles such as fire trucks, car carrier vehicles for vehicle deliveries get in and out of the site. We have, we are radiusing a lot of our internal islands back here and through here so that those large vehicles can pass through the site safely. And that would include the car carrier, would include the fire trucks, other kinds of delivery vehicles. Because what has been happening, and really it's not always in the control of the dealership, but independent contractors who deliver vehicles and so forth, sometimes they'll stop in the right of way and unload in the turn lane, and that's not safe for anybody. So we're trying to mitigate that situation by improving the driveways on 41. It helps, we're increasing the radiuses. It helps people exit the road quicker. We're doing this little safety improvement for FDOT. So that's, because we're increasing our intensity there, they get a chance to ask us to do those things. Again, there's the 16-foot wall along the east side. Along the south side, it's 8 foot. These are, the conditions from the original CPD approval. There is an IDD canal along the south side. Lee County maintains this former IDD canal. The maintenance path actually for the canal is along the south side of the canal. And this pathway goes all the way over to where it almost touches 10 Mile Canal. But this canal drains westerly into Lakes Park. There is the dry detention area for this project is at the rear. This open area you see to the north of us, that's part of Market Square, this is their stormwater detention system. They have a control structure in their south. You might even see where this little wet area is here. They have an outfall right here at Nissan's northeasterly corner. Their south northeasterly corner. The Target Plaza enjoys easements through the Nissan parcel down to this canal. So there are two drainage easements. One's a maintenance for the drainage and one's a drainage easement, about 45 feet on their easterly tip of the Nissan parcel. And then there's a 15-foot buffer, and then there's the 16-foot wall. The required buffer plantings are on the east side of the wall, and those were put in initially with the original expansion. As this project goes underway, we'll come in here, we'll pull all the exotics that have grown in the detention area, make sure that's back up to spec, go around here, and again, double check the buffers, make sure the buffers are up to spec, and we'll have an obligation to address exotic removal in there, which was one of the discussions with Brynwood. So we did have this is what I wanted to talk about, FDOT. So I've kind of addressed all of this. Other than what I've shown, we don't have to add any more turn lanes. There's a southbound directional left turn lane into the site. It's all there. We're just doing driveway upgrades and that one taking out a part of the turn lane for safety reasons. We did have a meeting with Brynwood, so we reached out to them. Had a Zoom meeting with them last week with some of their residents. Chris Bunshoe, the Morays, the Campbells, the Sharmas, to kind of go over their concerns. And like Fred mentioned, they're essentially the same as before, and they've been mitigated. I mean, with a 16-foot wall, I think our nearest piece of pavement is about 400 feet from the nearest home, so that's pretty significant. The walls there, the plantings on the east side of the wall will be checked to make sure they meet spec and will be restored to requirements as we go through. I think that's about all that I can say, unless you have any particular questions.
I think that you addressed them. Were there, it's minor, but there was mention of bus stop improvements. Is there a transit?
Oh, yeah. So what we're going to do is, anytime you're doing a project within a quarter of a mile of a bus stop, there's actually a bus stop north and there's a bus stop south. The bus stops already have a concrete slab. You know, the slab might be quite big enough, or it might be missing the bike rack. So what we do instead in these situations is we propose a fee in lieu of to Lee-Tran, and they're usually more agreeable to that. I don't know what the traffic is on those other two bus stops, you know, how often they're used, and whether they do have, those other two bus stops do have improvements, but they're not quite up to what they ask for during development order reviews, which is an 8x30 piece of concrete. So their concrete's a little smaller than that. It's not really a standard that's codified in the code, but that's what's usually asked for during DO reviews by Lee-Tran. So they're usually pretty agreeable to that. They haven't commented in this case anything other than that. It's at least through the zoning part of it that I'm aware of.
Is there a pending DO already to do?
We filed the DO last Friday. So the building plans are complete. The development orders filed. The building plans are going through private party review. So as soon as the timing will work out, that as soon as maybe this case is decided, then the development order will be ready. We'll be basically waiting on the zoning case, I think. And I think that was a fair risk in this case to move forward with that. All things considered, the dealership needs to get its business moving forward timing-wise. It's a phased project. I didn't go over phasing, and I don't know that it's really material to the zoning case. But, oops, hit the wrong, oops. Keep hitting the arrows instead of the red button. So Nissan, not Nissan, but Genesis will be built as a standalone project. The Nissan is a little more complicated. That we basically have to build the rear half of the Nissan building while the existing building stays in place. The rear half is the service section of the Nissan building, and it's being designed as where it can stand alone on its, from power, electricity, life safety, and things like that. Then the rear half of the existing Nissan building will be demolished, and then the front of the new Nissan building will be constructed, and then the final removal of the front of all their offices and sales and things like that are here. So we elected to do that rather than trying to bring in a whole bunch of temporary buildings so they could stay in business. We felt that was the least disruptive to their operations. But it's going to be a fun little project over the next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. King, you
Yes, sir.
want to talk about your 48-hour?
Oh, thank you, Chahram, for reminding me. So in the 48-hour letter, I did have one deviation that when I wrote the deviation, it's an existing deviation number 6, what had to do, so these existing buildings, deviation number 6, this existing building, which is now gone, had a 7.5-foot setback to the north property line. And I believe this building was quite old. It may have predated many of the current land development codes, especially those pertaining to automobile dealerships. So there's a 20-foot, there's a 40-foot building setback, which the new Genesis building, in the code, there's a 40-foot building setback for dealerships. The new Genesis building meets that setback, since all these existing buildings are gone. There's a second piece of that part of Chapter 34 that has a 20-foot setback for inventory. That deviation was approved as 7.5 foot with the original approval. Our proposed pavement line is about 10 foot. So when I wrote the deviation request, I wanted it to pertain to also pertain to the new common line between the two dealership buildings. And I left out, it still needs to apply to the north line. I did indicate on the site plan, on the master concept plan, it's deviation number 6. I did indicate on the plan, but I forgot to put it in the text. And so I addressed that in the 48-hour letter. I don't believe staff has any objection to that since it was previously approved. Other than that, just a couple of typos in the use table.
Yeah, if you're going to talk about deviations, I wasn't sure who to direct that to.
That would be me. If you have any questions on deviations.
About the interconnect, and it looked to be seeking to not have to connect to any of the properties to the north, but the master concept plan shows connected to adjacent parcel.
Well, we show a stub out. It's not really connected because the adjacent parcel where the restaurant is. So I show a little stub out here just for future. What has happened since the original CPD is the mixed use overlay came into place. So the question was during review was stubbing out to the this parcel here, which is a large cell phone tower, and it also internet switching operation right there, and then also the water management area for Target Plaza. So you can see the 9 there and the 9 up there pertain to not stubbing out to those two parcels.
So you would still be providing it to.
Yeah, in the future, yeah, if they needed to connect or something like that, they could connect right there. If the restaurant, I think this was built as Dwyer's. The Dwyer family basically owns the Qualcomm. Well, it's not. Is it Qualcomm or Cellular One, or I don't know exactly what they're called. They might be part of Verizon today. But so we do show a little stub out right there. I mean, it'll be used for display parking until such time as this property ever gets redeveloped. It's possible. There's a large billboard there that would have to be attended to. But again, I think all of this sort of happened. I think Dwyer's might have been built prior to the mixed-use overlay being introduced into the code. We did not have to stub out to the south because of the IDD canals. Staff has a policy, if it's over 50 feet, you don't have to do the stub out in a situation like this. Plus, it would require a bridge and would be overly burdensome.
And deviation 7 was withdrawn, correct? That it was reflected as that way in the staff report, but the numbering retained, I assume?
Yeah. Deviation 7 was. Deviation 7 pertained to this existing building, the perimeter plantings around this existing building. They were remodeling this building when it went from Kelly Tractor to Nissan. They were remodeling this building, and it didn't have the buffer plantings around the side, the building perimeter plantings. But the 2 new buildings will provide landscaping areas adjacent to the building and meet the building perimeter planting requirements.
Thank you. That was the extent of my questions. Did staff have any other questions?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder, Chahram.
We'll have Mr. Dravlik, please come back on up. And I apologize, Madam Examiner. Both Mr. Dravlik, Mr. Treach, and Mr. Kelly have all been previously accepted and testified as experts.
Yes, thank you.
All right, we'll sum up the lead plan consistency. Now, in this case, I'm not going to go through each one of these individually. The staff report captures them very well. The use hasn't changed. The schedule use is going to be the same, and like we outlined, the surrounding buffers and other things that we keep from impacting outside of the piece of property are, for the most part, going to move forward. So the consistency that was is the consistency that is. But particularly with in regards to the policy 1.1.2, the intensive future land use category, I think this use, again, is in the right place, in the right land use category. I'll go through the LDC decision criteria, and we'll hit up with that'll touch on most of these other ones, but policies 6.1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 through 11 are for commercial development, and we are consistent with those now. We can intend to be consistent with those through the development order process and when moving forward. So the decision-making criteria, of course, that is necessary to find approval for this case in LDC 34-145-4A, 1 and 2, we believe that we comply with. So us as staff believe we comply with the Lee plan and its policies, objectives, and goals. We meet the code and the other county regulations with the deviations and that enhance the intent of the regulations, or at least allow for existing development to move forward. Compatible with the existing and planned uses in the surrounding area, like when we did the walk around, we could see that the car dealerships and other similar intense retail and commercial uses are similar in the surrounding area. For the places that they aren't with the residential, they're properly buffered and conditioned. 2 access ways onto US 41, major arterial. Any impacts on transportation facilities, as Mr. Keene outlined, will be addressed at the time of DO with improvements being made on US 41, so we believe we meet that decision-making criteria as well. Not affect environmentally critical areas or sensitive areas. They've been addressed in the zoning conditions, the development order, and the existing ERP with the preservation areas and the proper dry detention. And served by adequate urban services. The dealership is operating now. We have the access to sewer, water, police, fire, transit, urban sidewalks, access to the arterial network in the area, and the bikeways and shared pathways in the area as well. Specifically with the PD criteria, the proposed mix of uses needs to be appropriate at the proposed location. And as we said, with the similar uses and intensity, north, south, and west, and then the proper setbacks and conditions for the residential to the east and south, we believe we comply. Recommended conditions provide sufficient safeguards to the public interest. Conditions for addressing noise, hours of operation, environmental preservation, vegetative buffers, buffer wall, those are all in place in order to accomplish that criteria. And the application includes 7 deviations that we believe enhance the achievement of objectives and preserve and promote the general intent of the code to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. So with that, the conclusion slide, and then we'll be here for questions, that the applicant is in agreement with the staff report, and we believe that there's no, that the outlined change in the 48-hour letter, that staff and the applicant are both in agreement with that change, that we're compatible with surrounding land use pattern, and conditioned to address any external impacts where compatibility isn't as high as it is on the other commercial surrounding areas. That we implement the intentions of the intensive future land use category consistent with the goals, policies, objectives of the Lee County Comprehensive Plan, and we're consistent with the Land Development Code decision-making criteria, allowing for a recommendation of approval.
Thank you.
And that's
I
it.
didn't have any further questions. Did staff have any questions?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Chahram from Lee County Zoning. My resume is on file. I was recognized as expert in the zoning and planning. Thank you. The request is an amendment to Resolution Z-11-031. They want to expand the building, tear down the existing buildings and expand them. And basically, that's the extent of the request, and some minor changes to the master concept plan. And staff reviewed this case. This is basically an existing site, and what they are proposing is an improvement. The use is not changing. The new deviations they are requesting is because of the land development code requirements now. And the buffers and the famous wall is already there. And staff received a letter of opposition from Brynwood Homeowners Association stating that they will adamantly oppose this case at the public hearing. And that's the reason we scheduled for half a day to give enough time for them to speak. And I have the letter here.
Thank you. Thank you. And so this was dated March 22nd. Have you received any more recent?
No, ma'am, that was the only one. I guess subsequent to that, the applicant has talked to the homeowners association and the people living in the area, and they were satisfied with what they heard. And with that said, we are going to resend and replace the resolution Z11-031 with this approval. All the existing conditions, either they were brought into the new resolution or they were already met. Like buffers, walls, and all those requirements are already met. There's no reason to have them in the new resolution. And the lighting condition that you were mentioning, it says must be brought up into compliance with the land development code, which it is. And we decided that it's the land development code. They have to comply with the land development code. There's no reason to have this condition saying that they have to comply with it. And with that said, they are in full compliance with the goals, policies, and objectives of the LEA plan and the requirements of the land development code. And staff recommends approval of this case. And we reviewed the 48-hour letter, and we agree with the applicants. And my apology for the typos. And we agree with the amendment changes to the deviation. And that concludes my.
Yes, on the conditions you mentioned, some of them weren't carried forward because they had been complied with. The environmental conditions still make reference to being prior to the issuance of the first DO. Is that relative to the existing site, or are you saying the DO amendment or the new DO that they're having to get now?
The environmental conditions that they were brought forward, I talked to our environmental reviewer, and she believes that this condition should stay because things may change and trees may die, and they wanted this condition to stay.
I don't object to them staying. I think removing prior to the issuance of the first development order as the triggering language is just unnecessary. If it's already been complied with, I wasn't sure if those were already satisfied.
Yeah, we can modify the language, remove that portion of it, sure.
Okay. That was the extent of my questions. Did applicant have any questions of staff?
No, the applicant doesn't have any questions of staff. I do understand the recommendation of staff not to carry forward the lighting addition, but I understand clearly, I think what the hearing examiner is pointing to is that it may make the neighbors feel more comfortable to see this is the standard they're held to, and they can look it up in the code rather than having that knowledge otherwise, so we have no objection.
I have no objection to that. It's just, I think it's not really necessary to say that they have to comply with the code. They have to.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Were there any closing comments that either party wanted to put on the record before we conclude today?
No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I appreciate it, and please stay well, and certainly when this gets released, it will go. I do want to ask that question, I suppose. The pending DO, you mentioned, Mr. Keene, is there a timing requirement in terms of getting this case released and scheduled for the board? You know they take the break in July, so that date has already passed.
Yeah.
This won't get heard until at least August.
Yeah, I imagine we'll go through a couple of rounds of review with the development order. The first round, at least the second round of review, so that's, 60 to 90 days in that regard. So that's June, July, August, that we'll be working on the DO. So, I imagine pretty simple case, September maybe board, if that's possible. Not to rush your work, but.
Not at all. I'm letting everyone know because with the board taking the break in July, some folks don't realize that date to pass was actually May 25th to get on the last agenda before that break occurs. So anything that's happening now, even if I get it released tomorrow, it's not going to get heard until August.
We understood that part. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we definitely understood that part. And I think the timing would work out well with the other permitting that we're doing.
Okay, thank you. And thank you again for coming. Everyone, please do stay well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.